when the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people want communities of faithful believers to do something, like, for example, vote for a particular candidate in an election if we're in a democracy, or if we decide who is going to represent us in a government, who's going to be representative of the people. The religious authority figures will, under the direction of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people, tell communities of faithful believers to vote for those candidates for office who best satisfy the needs and aspirations of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people. Again, the special needs and aspirations of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people are achieve and maintain authority, power, order, and control. So getting back to the question of why has pessimism become so widespread within our culture, and why do we not hear about, from anybody except for me, that I know of anyways, why do we not hear about a belief in the value of the most optimisticness? And the answer I have for you is this. The needs and aspirations of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people to achieve and maintain authority, power, order, and control have superseded our needs and aspirations. Our common needs and aspirations are achieve and maintain happiness, good health, and prosperity. So they would rather have authority, power, order, and control over communities of faithful believers, and by extension, people of the domestic territory that they rule over, that the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people rule over. They would rather have authority, power, order, and control over people rather than to enable the people to be happy. They don't care about that. They don't care about your happiness. They don't care about your good health. They don't care about your prosperity. They care about achieving and maintaining authority, power, order, and control. And so their institutions of spiritual slavery, their religious organizations, their aggressive ideological traditions that originated before the establishment of ancient paternalistic theocracies, essentially what they do is they funnel authority, power, order, and control into the hands of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people. And part of that funneling effect is achieved by replacing a large middle class, for example, with psychotic extremes of poverty and wealth. Replacing a secular pluralistic society with a religious elitist society. Replacing freedoms and rights with slaveries and wrongs. And replacing a democracy with an authoritarian regime. And so you can see in this country, at least, it appears, most recently we've been heading in the direction of greater wealth inequality, right? That's placing a large middle class with psychotic extremes of poverty and wealth. There's a strong drive on the part of I'm tempted to call them satanic nationalists, but they like to be known as Christian nationalists. Why am I tempted to call them satanic nationalists? Because Christians are Satanists. That's why. And what's a Satanist? A Satanist is a person who believes in the value of a pessimistic myth. The pessimistic myth is an evil entity rules over the earth. It doesn't matter what else they believe. If a person believes in this pessimistic myth, then they're a Satanist. But to eliminate the confusion here, I'm just going to go ahead and call them Christian nationalists as they wish to be called. And we can see, therefore, the outlines of what they're attempting to achieve here. Spiritual slavery, turn the populace into a bunch of slaves, get rid of any education system that could possibly cause them to question the pessimistic myths, all right? Question the idea that we have discovered these pessimistic myths are truths. Get rid of anything like that. Or make it so dangerous to suggest otherwise that everyone keeps silent who has any questions in their own minds, keeps them to themselves. Slave people and convince them that if they are good little slaves and they spend their entire life doing the will of the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people, then they will be rewarded with an afterlife of divine eternal bliss. They will be elevated to a place of divine eternal bliss and rewarded for all eternity. Just be a good little slave. So this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to enslave everybody, or as many people as they can. That's the end game. That's what they want. Slaves. Why? Why do they want that? Because they're paranoid. That's why. Now they can't get away with, claiming to be God, can they? Although they are part of God. We all are. According to my belief in the value of the most optimistic myths. They can't get away with that, but they can get away with claiming to be representatives of the good entity. They can get away with that, can't they? So why am I talking about Christianity so much? Why am I talking about Christian nationalism so much? Why am I talking about these things? And the reason I'm talking about them is because they're active in politics now, right? They formed a coalition along with billionaires and multimillionaires, and basically captured all three branches of our federal government, and also many other states within this country. They've captured those states as well. And they have it in their mind that, many Christians have it in their mind that, we're in a culture war, right? So now who's the culture war between? Two different forms of pessimism. From my point of view, as a person who believes in the value of the most optimistic myths, they are presenting the culture war as a competition between two different forms of pessimism. On the one hand, you have atheism, and on the other hand, you have what I call Satanism, but what they call Christianity. Two different forms of pessimism. Why is Christianity pessimistic? Should be obvious. They're pessimistic about the future. These are the end times. Right? These are the end times, they say. Oh, final, necessary, horrible war will be fought. It's imminent. And Judgment Day is nigh. And if you're not a good little slave, and you're not doing exactly what the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people and their slave drivers, religious authority figures, tell you to do, and you're going to go to a place of abominable infernal torment. Right? If you don't do what the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people say, and their religious authority figures, then you're going to be cast down to a place of danger and exposure. That's what they say. That's what they're trying to tell you. That's what they're trying to tell us. Right? Psychological cornering of people, enslavement, spiritual enslavement. And so this coalition has, appeared. I've noticed it my entire life. Sort of this nexus between spiritual slavery and the few paranoid, oppressive, violent people who concentrate wealth and commune power in their own hands and rule over domestic territories. This is nothing new. We've had thousands of years of this. Christianity is not new. It has a track record. It's interesting how people ignore this. They ignore the track record. They say, well, this time it's going to work. This time it's going to be better. Track record of failure, right? Successes too, but failures. Failure to keep the peace. Why? What brand of Christianity? Right? What brand of Christianity? This is a question for Christian nationalists. They want to make America a Christian country. Meaning what? Meaning everybody else who practices something other than Christianity is either treated like a second-class citizen or deported, perhaps. Or enslaved, right? Under horrendous conditions until they drop dead of starvation and or disease. Or maybe just murdered upon arrival to a place of danger and exposure. That's called fascism, right? So, this is what needs to be talked about, in my opinion.